Hi and welcome to another narration, presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the arse of the subscription button as well. And remember to chokehold that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. And by subscribing, you'll be the first to see all our new spooky creepypasta stories. I would like to reach out and say a huge thank you to those of you who have been supporting Cryptids Roost financially with your sponsorship. We pray the good Lord replenishes you abundantly, and to those of you who will, later on. We pray the good Lord bless you as you do so. And also a huge thank you to everyone for always supporting the channel with your likes, comments and shares as well. It is all very much appreciated. God bless you all. Now let's just take a moment's silence for all the haters. That'll do. And why not hashtag Cryptids Roost in your comments. And I hope you all had an enjoyable Halloween. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. Road Rage. This awesome story is written by getyaisha, a wonderful author over on Reddit. If you'd like to read more of his works, the Reddit link to his profile will be below in the description. As I recall, it started off as a normal day. I'd finished work early and was on my way home when I got caught in traffic. My first thought was, shit, here we go. But I hadn't paid much attention to the time. Reaching for a cigarette, I happened to glance at the clock. It was 10:45 in the morning. On any other day, this stretch of freeway would be smooth sailing, but today it was bumper to bumper and we weren't moving. Letting down my window, I fired up and settled in. I figured there had to be a wreck further ahead. In any case, the traffic would be clearing out eventually. After 10 minutes, most people were putting their vehicles in park and I was starting to get irritated. Adjusting myself in the seat, I tried to look around the cars ahead. Adjusting myself in my seat, I tried to look around the cars ahead of me, but whatever it was, I couldn't see it. After a minute or so, I started hearing sirens. Now, I was almost certain there'd been an accident. Not wanting to waste any more gas, I shut off the engine. A few minutes turned to an hour. The people closest to the exits were driving over the embankment that leads to the service road. Unfortunately, we'd had a lot of rain recently and the ground was soft. The first few made it through, then they started getting stuck, blocking the way. The traffic on the feeder was backed up just as bad, if not worse, than the freeway. No one was going anywhere. Trying to calm myself down, I turned the radio on. The second the speakers came to life, my ears were assaulted by the sound of emergency alert system.
The following message is transmitted at the request of emergency management. A shelter-in-place order has been issued as a deadly chemical has been detected in the area. All residents are advised to shelter in place immediately. Sheltering in place requires you to take the following actions. Stay indoors, close all windows and doors, turn off all ventilation systems such as heating and air conditioning units, and seal all cracks with tape or wet towels. Stay calm and do not leave your home for any reason. Please stay tuned to local news media outlets for more information on this life-threatening situation.
The message repeated a few times before ending. You could literally feel the panic roll through the crowd. I was frantically scanning through the radio stations trying to find a news channel while everyone else was sealing themselves in their cars. For some reason I couldn't find a single station reporting on the situation. At best, all I caught was traffic reports telling people to avoid the area. Giving up, I turned it off and rolled up my window. By noon, the sun was beating down on the roof of my car, turning it into a sauna. I felt like I was stewing in my own juices. Sweat rolled down my face as I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes, trying not to think about it. But there was no escaping the heat. Stripping down to my t-shirt and boxers took a little of the edge off. I could only imagine what others were going through. Some of those cars looked really uncomfortable. The thought of being trapped in the front seat of a box truck with 2 other people made me cringe as I glanced over at the rig 2 lanes over. I could see the driver with his face nearly against the glass, trying to stay cool. In the car next to me on my right, there was an older lady in a BMW. She was drinking a bottle of water and reading a book to pass the time. I couldn't understand how she was staying so calm. Looking around at everyone, I could see more people were having a hard time, and we had no idea how much longer we would be there. Hours ticked by. I tried the radio over and over, but nothing was being said. From what I could tell, nothing was happening. Then somewhere in the crowd, someone reached their limit and started their engine. It was a chain reaction after that, and one by one people cranked up and turned on their ACs. A few others, like myself, didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but my AC hadn't worked since I bought the car. I had to laugh at it. No matter how old we get, people will almost always do exactly the opposite of what they're told to do. Eventually someone got out to stretch their legs. When nothing happened to them, of course, others followed. It wasn't long before I was letting my windows down to get some air. The thought of walking home crossed my mind, but I was still close to an hour's drive away. Putting it out of my head, I sat watching as people started talking amongst themselves. Some passed out water, while others were locking their cars up and attempting to leave on foot. That's when I noticed the helicopters. I can't say for certain that they hadn't been there the entire time, but from my point of view, they didn't show up till people started to leave. They didn't make any attempts to stop anyone, but still, something felt wrong. There were no police markings or news station logos on either of them. The only thing that really stood out was the colour. Yellow. Something about it bothered me. The more I stared at them, I noticed they weren't making a lot of noise. Normally helicopters are loud. You know when they're around, but these were almost silent. As more and more people started leaving, one of them flew off while the other circled overhead. After a few minutes, it flew off in the opposite direction. I watched it for a while, thinking how great it would be to fly past traffic, laughing at the people stuck in it. Smiling at the thought, I shook my head and tried to relax. It got quiet after that, and a cool breeze drifted in. A breath of fresh air felt great. The funny thing is, the first thing I did was grab a cigarette and ruin it. Blowing out the smoke, I closed my eyes and leaned back in my seat. As I brought my hand up to take another drag, there was a tap at the window. Startled, I quickly glanced to my right to see the woman from the next car standing outside. Leaning down a little to look in at me, she smiled and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Sorry to bother you, but could I please get one of those?" Nodding my head, I handed her a smoke, then got out to join her. By the time I'd made my way to where she was standing, she was lighting up. She thanked me again and told me her name was Grace. I told her mine, then we stood there sharing theories on what was going on. Once we'd both finished smoking, she turned to get back in her car and stopped. Looking at me, she smirked and shook her head. "Hey, Keith, I have a few bottles of water in here. Would you like one?" Of course I wanted the water. When she handed one to me, she paused one last time. "Could you do me a favour? If we do this again, could you wear some pants? It's a little weird talking to a stranger in his underwear I hadn't realised I was still in my boxes till she pointed it out, doing my best to play it off. I told her I would, then got back in my car. More time slid by. The sun was setting and still nothing other than more emergency alerts were telling everyone to stay in place. A family in the truck ahead of me was setting up lawn chairs while lighting a barbecue pit. I guess they didn't want their groceries to go to waste. Pulling up my phone, I took pictures and video attempting to post them on social media to get some type of information, but all of my accounts were flagged and blocked. After trying a few times, I asked around and found others having the same issues. There wasn't much I could do. Calling the police got about as much attention as anything else I'd tried. At that point, I made up my mind to walk. I just slipped the keys in my pocket when I started hearing people yelling, "Sam! Yell if you can hear us! Where are you?" They repeated it over and over again till they came into view. When they got to the area I was in, they started asking everyone if they'd seen a boy with dark hair wearing a blue t-shirt and shorts. I didn't remember seeing the kid, and judging by the responses they were getting, neither did anyone else. They asked around for a while longer, then moved on. A few people volunteered to help and left with them. Shrugging it off, I stretched and looked around, then waved to Grace. She was standing outside her car watching the group walk away. When she noticed me waving, she came over. We didn't talk for long. I told her I was leaving and she asked if she could come with me. Of course I agreed, and once she'd locked up her car, we left. The plan was to take the exit ramp to the street and find a gas station or a store where we could hopefully find out what was going on. As we started our way down, I noticed I hadn't seen anyone standing outside their cars on the service road. Hey, does anything seem odd to you? Where's everyone at? Stopping to take a look for herself, she narrowed her eyes, scanning the sea of parked cars for a moment before gasping. "Oh my God, I think we should go back," she uttered, nervously pointing to a pickup near the end of the off-ramp. There was someone lying on the ground next to it. I didn't see any blood, he just seemed to be lying there. I finally took a moment to really get a good look around. There were bodies everywhere, some still in their cars, others on the sidewalk or next to their vehicles. What the hell's going on? My words fell short as I backed away expecting to bump into Grace. I didn't. Looking back to see her reaction, I spotted her hightailing it back to her car. With no idea what to do next, I did the same. Fumbling with my keys, I popped the lock and jumped in, slamming the door shut before trying to tell everyone to get back inside. When I realised they couldn't really understand what I was saying, I laid on the horn and let my window down just enough for them to hear me. "Get inside! Hurry! You have to get in!" Seeing I was serious, a lot of them ran to their vehicles and closed themselves in. The ones who didn't, well, they learnt the hard way. It's not easy to explain what happened next. Everything was so chaotic. I barely understood what I was looking at. First, the children started running away from their parents. They seemed terrified. If that wasn't enough to freak me out, what the adults did next almost made me lose my shit. One by one, they all stopped and started staring at the ground. I couldn't see what they were looking at, but before I knew it, they started staggering away, calling out their children's names. Not long after that, they started dropping. From what I could tell, there was nothing wrong with them. They were just acting strange, then falling down. I was literally stuck staring at the bodies for who knows how long before they started moving. I halfway expected them to turn into zombies. That probably would have been better than what actually happened. For the first few seconds they seemed confused, staggering around, rubbing their eyes, looking like they were waking up. Out of nowhere, one of them screamed, "Where's my baby?" That seemed to trigger the rest. They snapped into action. They called out names and went car to car asking everyone for help. No one so much as cracked a window to respond. Most did their best to ignore them, while others screamed. One guy pulled a gun and threatened to shoot if they didn't get away from his vehicle. After a few minutes, some other guy got out of his jeep and tried to help. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but the moment he pointed down the freeway, they attacked him. This guy must have been a fighter or something, because he beat the brakes off a couple of them before they took him down. They tore him apart and painted themselves with his blood. When they were done, they went right back to looking for their children. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't think I blinked once the entire time. As the crowd slowly vanished down the road, I relaxed a little. For some reason, I couldn't stop myself from glancing over at the Jeep guy. There wasn't much left. His lower jaw was missing, and most of his skin had been stripped away. The rest was just a shell. His guts, spilled out on the concrete, had been stepped on and smeared into a meaty paste. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life, but I couldn't look away. I kept imagining what it must have been like in those last few moments, feeling their fingers ripping into him and looking at their faces. It had to have been horrible. Closing my eyes, gripping the wheel, I sat there trying to pull myself together. Nothing about this made sense. There had to be a reasonable explanation, but I couldn't think one up. Opening my eyes, I dug in my pocket for my smokes. As I did, I caught a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my eye. Turning to get a better look, I spotted Grace holding up a piece of white paper. On it were 2 words, "Get down." A little confused by the message, I shrugged my shoulders. Grace pulled the paper away, then pointed back towards the feeder road before ducking down in her seat. I looked back in time to see a crowd of people headed our way. They immediately started attacking cars, smashing through the windows, dragging anyone inside out into the mob. They would be on me any minute. I had to make a decision. There was no place to hide in my shitty little Honda. It was either wait till they got me or run while I had the chance, and risk being one of them. I didn't want to do either, but running seemed like the only real choice. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and bolted. I ran till my muscles ached and my lungs felt like they were on fire. I could hear them coming. Without knowing for sure if they were after me, I hid underneath an 18-wheeler and prayed they'd pass me by. Wish I could tell you what they were doing to the people they were pulling out of their vehicles, but the truth is, I never looked back. Listening to the screams, I could only imagine how awful it was. I was laying there gasping for air, trying to stay quiet long enough to get a second wind. That's when the shooting started. I figured a few weren't going down without a fight. Thinking this might be my only chance to run, I rolled out and stood up, coming face to face with some prick in a bloody pastel polo carrying a tire iron. He smiled and tilted his head to the side. "Hey pal, me and a few of the boys were wondering if you could help us out with something." He had a wild look in his eyes that told me everything I needed to know. "Look dude, I can't help you. I'm just trying to get the fuck out of here." He smirked, giving me a disbelieving look, then asked, "Are you sure?" I stepped back as 2 more guys came jogging over, carrying severed limbs they'd been using as clubs. I wasn't sticking around. I turned and raced out of there while the guy I'd been talking to yelled out, "You see? I knew you'd be the one to help us." They hooted and howled, taunting me as they chased me down. The further I ran, the more I saw. Everywhere I turned, people were slaughtering each other. A part of me was glad I didn't have time to look at it. As I reached the top of the next overpass, something heavy thumped against the back of my skull, causing me to stumble into a crash landing against the guardrail. "Great shot! Let's get him up and see if you can do it again," one of them yelled, while I was trying to clear the fog from my brain. I had no idea what I had been hit with. All I knew for sure was I didn't want it to happen again. I could hear them laughing, making jokes about how I'd fallen. Grabbing the guardrail, I pulled myself up, glancing back to see where they were. One of them was climbing up on the hood of a car. He was holding something, but his back was to me, so I couldn't see what it was. The other two were attacking a minivan, while the people inside did their best to keep them out. Dazed and exhausted, on the verge of giving up, I tried to compose myself. I didn't want to die. Call it a second wind or a sudden surge of adrenaline, but I found the energy to make an escape. Staggering and stumbling, I did my best to avoid the chaos around me, hoping I didn't get hit again. Making my way past a group of people fighting, I ducked down, weaving between the cars for cover. I couldn't tell if they were chasing me. I didn't want to look back. Running a little further, I turned to go around an SUV and stopped. There were two women holding another woman down, while a third used a pair of pliers to rip out her teeth. My mouth fell open. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Before I could begin to wrap my mind around it, some burly guy with a shotgun ran up behind the lady with the pliers and blew her head off. It happened so fast I didn't have time to focus. All I could do was change directions and hope he didn't shoot me next. I ran till I couldn't run anymore. I could see another semi a few cars over. My first thought was to climb on top of it, but as I got closer I noticed the trailer didn't have a padlock on the cargo door. Unfortunately, the second I reached for it, something heavy thumped against the back of my skull, this time bouncing my head off the trailer, sending me straight to my knees. It didn't knock me out, but I couldn't move. All I could do was sit there, drooling on myself like a goddamn mental patient. After a few seconds, I heard the polo guy's voice. "I think this one might be broken," he chuckled, leaning down to look me in the eyes while snapping his fingers to get my attention. When I didn't respond, he shook his head, then stepped back, stood up straight and kicked me in the chest, knocking me over. "Let's go, guys. We'll find a better one next time." While I lay there drooling into my ears, I finally saw what I'd been getting hit by. One of the guys was carrying a smoke grenade launcher. He was loading it with rubber rounds as he walked by, laughing at me. I don't know how long I laid there stuck on stupid before I finally got the feeling back in my body. The moment I was able to move, I rolled to my side and puked my guts out. The throbbing pain in my brain was so bad I could barely keep my eyes open. I couldn't get up. I could hardly move, but I could hear more people coming. I did the only thing I could think of. I played dead. Closing my eyes and holding my breath, I prayed they'd pass me by. But as the footsteps got closer, I flinched. My eyes popped open and I did my best to scoot back till I saw Grace's face. She quickly came over to me, kneeling down while looking around. "Keith? Holy shit, I thought you were dead. You have to get up. There's more headed this way. We need to hide." I told her about the truck. Then she helped me up and we got inside. For the most part it was empty, but it was a decent place to hide. We sat there in the dark listening to the crowd pass by, and when it finally got quiet we both let out a sigh. Grace slouched back, shaking her head. "Everybody's coming this way. I don't think we can stay in here long. Can you walk?" I could barely think straight, but I told her I'd do my best. After a few minutes, she peeked out and told me it was time to go. Still disorientated, I followed her, not really paying attention to where we were going. We moved between cars, stepping over bodies and trying to stay out of sight. Eventually my vision cleared up, but that dull headache felt as if it was there to stay. At some point we were chased by a group of naked senior citizens and wound up hiding under a FedEx truck. I'll spare you the details of what we saw and move on to the gun. I found it under the truck once we were out of sight. There were 4 rounds left in the magazine, along with 1 in the chamber. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best news I'd had since everything started. Winting from the pounding in my skull, I turned to show Grace what I'd found. The moment we locked eyes, someone grabbed her by the ankles and dragged her from under the truck. Sliding out, I got up and rushed to where they were, just in time to see a small group of people dragging her towards the retention wall. It looked like they were going to throw her off the overpass. I didn't have time to think. Wildly bringing the pistol up, I let off a shot and hit one of them, causing the others to let go and run for cover. She scrambled to get up just as someone fired back at me, hitting the windshield of a nearby car. I ducked behind a minivan as they opened up. Bullets shattered windows and punched holes in everything around me. The guy I'd shot was screaming his head off, making it impossible to focus, but I had to keep moving. Making my way to the next car in line, I found Grace. She crawled for cover and made it without catching a slug. I guess the shootout must have attracted attention, because the next thing we knew, the naked old people came charging in. Honestly, I think I would have preferred getting shot. What they did to those guys was beyond words. I can't even bring myself to talk about it. With the old folks distracted, we made it out of there pretty easy. When we got to the next section, we saw what caused the traffic jam. There was a tanker truck flipped on its side. Blocking the road, the crowd was flocking to it. From where we were, I could see a way to the feeder road, but we would have to get really close to them in order to get there. I glanced over to see Grace staring at the tanker, slowly starting to move towards it. When I asked what she was doing, she turned to me with a blank expression on her face and said, "We have to go down there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Shaking my head, I pointed to the wreckage. "Go down there? For what? Look, you can do whatever you want. I'm not doing that. I'm getting out of here while I still can." As the words left my mouth, the helicopters returned. They slowed to a stop, hovering above the crowd surrounding the tanker. Just like before, they didn't seem to do anything other than watching. That brief moment I took my attention off Grace was all she needed to attack me. Screaming, she punched me in the side of the head, caused me to stumble, dropping the pistol in the process. "We have to get down there!" she screeched, lunging at me. Dodging her attacks as best I could, I manoeuvred round till I had no choice. I squared up and threw a hard jab straight to her nose. It only stopped her for a moment, but it was long enough for me to spot the gun and make a move for it. With her bearing down, screaming at the top of her lungs, I grabbed the pistol and turned in time to fire off a shot as she slammed into me. I couldn't tell if I'd hit her or not till we were slipping in her blood. At some point I lost my footing. We slammed into the side of a car, then tumbled to the ground. When we landed, the gun went off for a second time and she stopped moving. I lay there staring up at the sky, listening to the crowd with her pinning me to the ground. Grace's body felt like it weighed a ton, but I had to get her off me. The gunshots would bring trouble, and I didn't have the energy for another fight. Rolling her off me and slowly getting up, a loud thunk from my left grabbed my attention as something whizzed past my face, followed by a voice I'd hoped to never hear again. "Damn it, Brody, you missed!" It was the polo guy and his goons. Glancing over to see the guy with the launcher taking aim, I ducked and scrambled for cover behind the closest vehicle. It got quiet for a second and all I could hear was the sound of the crowd. I had to make it to that exit ramp. It was my only chance. Trying not to make any noise, I'd hurried to another hiding spot and stopped. A flash of movement drew my attention a few cars away. Aiming the gun in that direction, I nervously scanned around the area, but I didn't see anyone. A thud from behind me made me flinch. Quickly spinning around to see where it came from, I spotted someone moving and fired. I missed. Not wanting to waste another shot, I kept moving. I was passing a plumbing van when a sharp pain surged through my left leg and I collapsed. I'd been stabbed and was bleeding from a gaping wound in my calf. They were under the cars. Scooting away, I backed up to a tyre and braced myself. I still couldn't see them. Clutching the gun in my hands with my head on a swivel, I frantically searched for any sign of them. A sudden burst of movement on my right made me jump. As I turned to look, someone else darted on my left. They were closing in. I could hear them circling me, followed by the buckling of the hood of the car directly in front of me as one of them leapt on it. Without thinking, I raised the gun and fired, knocking the guy off his feet as another charged in from my left. I turned and fired my last round into him, just before the polo guy brought that tire iron down on my forearm, forcing me to drop the pistol. My fingers instantly went numb when I felt the bones snap. Before I could react, a second impact on my shoulder sent a shiver through my body as I toppled over. He was going to beat me to death if I didn't stop him, but I couldn't move without getting hit. Out of reflex, I brought up my damaged arm to shield me from another blow. The tire iron smashed against the point of my elbow with a meaty crack as he drew back, preparing to bring it down for the fourth time. There was a second the world shifted into slow motion just before everything exploded back to reality when some naked old man blindsided the polo guy and they fell on top of me. During the tussle, they rolled off my legs, giving me a chance to crawl away. I kept moving till I was a good distance from them. When I felt safe, I struggled to my feet. Hobbling away, I couldn't help but glance back. More naked senior citizens were dogpiling the polo guy. I had a good idea what was next, and I wasn't sticking around for the show. The further I went, the more I could see exactly what was going on around the tanker. There was a fluid spilling out, coating a large section of the road. It gave off a sweet smell, almost like bubblegum. The closer I got, the more I realised what I thought was screaming was actually the sounds of children playing in the chemical spill. The adults were doing the same, while the people trying to get in were killing each other, fighting to get closer to the pool. Mesmerised by what I was seeing, I stood there watching as more people raced by, diving into the chaos of the crowd. It took a moment for me to realise no one was coming out of the pool. The adults were literally melting into it, while the children seemed unfazed. Hell, they didn't even seem to notice. Looking at the helicopters hovering above the crowd, I couldn't shake the feeling they were responsible for this somehow. With everyone so drawn to the spill, no one so much as gave me a second look. I made my way to the exit ramp without a single problem. That's when all hell broke loose. There was a loud whoosh from the wreckage as it went up in flames, instantly engulfing anyone close to it. The joyful sound of children was replaced by the screams of the crowd burning to death. I couldn't look away. I watched them mindlessly diving into the lake of fire till the helicopters flying off snapped me out of it. Staggering, I made my way to the street and walked for a while before blacking out. When I came to, I was in the hospital. I told them I'd been jumped by a group of guys I'd never seen before, which wasn't a total lie. I just left out the part about the freeway, thinking it might be better if I kept that to myself. The entire incident was covered up and sold to the public as a tanker explosion. According to the news, the tanker jackknifed, then exploded, taking the lives of 83 people in the process. I did as much research as I could once I was out of the hospital. For the most part, I couldn't find anything worth mentioning. Then I stumbled across an article with a headline, "Miracle Drug Responsible for Deaths." The article was packed with big words I couldn't begin to spell and names of people I'd never heard of. But what caught my attention was a photo of their building. There, sitting on a landing pad positioned near the building, was a yellow, unmarked helicopter. I did everything I could to dig up information about the company, but it was like they'd just dropped off the face of the earth. I was honestly just going to let it go. But then about a week ago, I started getting strange calls and catching people watching me. I don't know who these people are or what I managed to survive, but I feel like I had to get this story out before anything happened to me. My name is Keith Murdoch, and if you're hearing this, I'm probably dead. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they really would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with YouTube's algorithm and will help to promote this channel more. And don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. And if you would like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase and I'll feature it in one of the videos. I now have my very own subreddit community where you can submit any stories you've written. You can submit your stories or encounters either there or send them to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. All the links are below. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit, and you'll also find me on Discord. If you would like to support this channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. Again, that will also be below.